Okay. Well, we've been working our way through this deck of cards for whatever value it is, buzzing through, giving quick thoughts on a lot of the games here, and maybe some thought of the era, the period, whatever. Worked our way up to World War I at this point, and I took a step away from the military to do some of the economic stuff, mixing that together. Let's look at World War I. Now, World War I, it's funny for me because World War I is really one of those periods where warfare changed so dramatically. I know a lot of people don't really see it that way. They see, you've got, what happened back in the Crimean War or the American Civil War, this trench warfare, that was already there. And yeah, you do foreshadow that. You have the railways as the big supply sources, but what do you start getting? You start getting the airplane. The machine gun, yes, it showed up in the American Civil War, and it showed up in the Franco-Prussian, but here it takes its new level of importance that just wasn't there. You have the automobile, where, really the French would not have been able to hold off the German attack anywhere near as effectively as they were had they not been able to rush outside of the established railroads and get supplies and troops to where they needed to. You have the beginnings then, like I said, you have the airplane coming in, you have these heavy artillery. You have the beginnings of the full modern war coming in here. This is really, by the end of World War I, some of the basic doctrines that are supposed, that are World War II's real strength have already been tested and tried in World War I to a large extent. Yes, sometimes somewhat, certainly on a smaller scale in most cases, but the very mobile warfare was being proven here. And it's kind of shocking that 20 years later, France believed that they could basically fight World War I, the beginning of World War I, after what they had seen. And they were. Anyway, let's take a look at what I've got here. I've got Ace of Aces, the old flip through books. I did Lost Worlds at one point. These are similar. You're flying planes against each other, and you pick maneuvers, and there's this ingenious little method where you get to look and see what you'd be seeing as the pilot and shoot your opponent that way. Diplomacy. This gets marked as World War I, but it's really almost an ahistorical situation. The board position at the beginning of the game is certainly World War I, but it's not, it's not a war game at all. It's just really what can you do within that diplomatic structure. La Grande Guerre, I did the vids for this. This is, for me, basically the grail of the World War I games. I had hopes that maybe Der Weltkrieg would, I can't pronounce it, Weltkrieg, would be as good in in a larger scale, because it's covering everything at an operational scale, and they are coming up with strategic rules for it. I just can't imagine that the strategic focus is going to be strong enough to cover the kind of decision making I'd want to make. This is truly a worldwide World War I coverage, which I don't think an operational game is going to do. Europe aside. They don't manage worldwide anyway. The Great War, this is the old brand game. Intriguing game. I prefer SPI's World War I, the little one, to it. It took some of World War I's ideas, moved it to an area map. You didn't see a lot of area maps in this period. Really cool counters that were already pre-clipped, essentially. and it had some interesting ideas to it, but as a game it kind of falters. It's too broken. My one entry from Great War in the East, Tannenberg. This was a fun little game. I'm not really willing to buy the rest of the Great War in the East series based on this, but it was kind of interesting with its hidden movement. Not completely hidden, but it uses these kind of reserve boxes. It's also a 3-player game, which is kind of weird. It doesn't have to be, but to help enforce certain restrictions between the Russian players cooperating. It's got a second scenario, or maybe 3 scenarios in it, to handle different battles in the same location. Imperial, this is the game that brought me back into gaming, really. A friend of mine online pointed me to this, and I've been going hard since I picked this guy up. I played it over online, and it just completely got me back in it. Jutland, interesting game. Feels like when you're playing the battles out, you're playing miniatures combat. You really are. You're measuring everything out and firing. The strategic game is played on a piece of paper. You're drawing your ship movements on there. It's, I don't know, I love the idea, but it never caught me quite as much as I would have wanted to. SPI's Kaiser's Battle, this was not well rated over on the SPI side for an S&T game, but I actually liked it better than most of the World War II stuff, of course. This is Operation Michael. It's really an attempt to turn the tide here, and you've got all the toys. In terms of, well, you don't have tanks, I don't think, in it, but in terms of the Germans, you have the Straßtruppen, you have gas coming in, you have planes, you have the artillery barrages of various different kinds. And you get to see it all in kind of an operational level. We'll get to another one more recent, that the Rock of the Marne that I did the videos for. I actually prefer Kaiser's Battle to that. I think it plays out, I don't know, maybe the game isn't as interesting, but I like the layout better, to tell you the truth. It's got the trenches in more depth and less of the back end stuff. Knights of the Air. I'm big on World War I airplane games, and I'll be hitting a few of these in here. Knights of the Air is the game I always wanted to work. I never quite got it. You're fiddling with all these little controls on your plane, the throttle, it's almost like a flight sim. Not necessarily terribly complicated, but I don't know what's going to happen. I play with these things. One cool thing about it is it's not simultaneous movement, so you can it's got kind of a pulsed actions where you're able to force the other person to make a movement, and then you can go, or whatever, if you're tailing. Very interesting game. I've never quite gotten comfortable enough with it to be happy about it. Okay, now we jump over to Paths of Glory, which I covered actually, and I only played it once. I'm not too thrilled with it. I've got to give it another shot, but for a number of reasons that I went in my video, it just didn't feel like World War I to me. And the point-to-point map really caused me some screw-ups there. Another World War I airplane game, Richthofen's War. This is the classic. I was never impressed with it. The complete lack of simultaneous movement. One thing it handles well is 2 players, flying more than a couple of planes each. But beyond that, it's just an interesting little footnote for me. And I've ended up rating it like a 4 because there's so many better air combat games, although they require more from a single player, single plane type of attitude. Rock of the Marne, standard combat series by the gamers. This was impressive mainly because, hey look, we took standard combat series and put it in World War I, and it really does work. Saw some more aspects there beyond what the gamers normally take. Very similar to Berg's Desert Fox, which I really love. Russia 1917. This is an AWE game. I'm okay on this one. Operational scale, some neat little pulsing things. You got to see my video for it to really get the feel on it, but it's never played out in a way that I thought was terribly interesting. It's kind of the problem. I don't know. It feels like it's almost this scripted situation. Russian Civil War, the old SPI game, got a recent republish. This is just an awesome game. Don't look at it as a historical simulation. Russia is the one you want for that if you want to, physically fight out these battles. But Russian Civil War is just this awesome, fun little game where you've got, to decide which side, which faction you're supporting and which you're not. Wings. Now this is the World War I air combat game that I decided is my pick. It would be tough. If I had Ace of Aces, I had a lot of fun with that. So that would be tough to compare to this. But Wings is more detailed than any of the others that I've seen, except maybe Knights of the Air. Wings has more planes, though, which brings it to a bonus level. It uses fully plotted movement, and has different levels of game play depending on whether you want to do a big dog fight with a few players or if you want a dueling game where each person has one plane. I haven't been able to find campaign rules for this poor thing, and here's what's weird. I have the, Excalibur edition of it, and it doesn't seem to have a full deck of planes. I got it new, and I think they were in shrink, the cards for the planes, but it seems almost as though maybe they did what they did with Ironclads and broke the game into two pieces. The Kinto version, though, only had one box, so I don't know. The Ironclads obviously had an expansion as well. SPI's World War I, I covered this as well. This is a fantastic little light treatment of all of World War I in a very, very simple fashion. It gives you some flexibility, maybe a little too much, but it really gives the feel better than anything that I've seen that's fairly simple. You don't always want to pull out La Grande Guerre or, something along that lines. But compared to, say, Paths of Glory, it just blows it away. Okay, so now we go to World War II. And let me check my timing here. All right, I'm going to boot this one up and go to World War II on its own.